Hi everybody, this is Matthew Poes with Poes Acoustics, and in this video I'm going to talk about something I don't know very much about. Maybe I kind of do, we'll see. So I just want to start by saying that the topic of the video is on, we'll call it desktop sound or gaming desktop sound. We could talk a little bit more about gaming sound in a more general sense, but what I want to start by saying around that is that for those of you who are really passionate and into this, please feel free to reach out, because I'm not a big gamer and I understand some of the tenets of it, and I've certainly looked into some of the underlying technology before to kind of understand how they're rendering sound objects in games and how that affects things. So something to remember, when I say I don't know a lot about it, but I do. Acoustics are acoustics, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about gaming acoustics or home theater acoustics or studio acoustics. The acoustic principles haven't changed. Good sound quality also doesn't change. So good sound on a small scale or a large scale has many of the same issues that we're dealing with. So I know what makes a good sounding speaker and what are good speakers. I know how to place them in a room to get good enveloping sound for a multi-channel system, and I know how to treat that room. With gaming, I think it means different things to different people. So I had somebody who posted about this and said, can you cover this? And I thought, I don't know that much about it, but it probably is a good topic to cover. My friend James Larson has been bugging me to cover it for a long time because it really is a growing market that is very likely eclipsing many times over again the home theater market. And it has fallen over into the home theater market. So a lot of the high-end sound research that's been happening around realism, because games are a lot about realism, or giving you the perception of really being there, have led to a lot of focus on using headphones with binaural and then using rendering systems that are related to high-order ambisonics. And high-order ambisonics allows you to recreate very realistically these sound objects around you in a way that would make you think, especially with head tracking, that you're really there. It actually can be done with speakers too. You don't need to do it with headphones. It's just that the number of speakers and the optimal placement of speakers and the treatment of the room is so critical that pretty much nobody could ever do that in their room. There also are not systems right now that are readily available that you could use to put together such a system outside of a computer. You'd have to have a computer with probably 16 to 32 channels of sound output, and then you'd have to have the ambisonics decoder software running, and you'd have to be able to feed it in from the game system, the right encoded material, and I don't really know where that stands, but I don't believe that that's available. So what we're typically stuck with are Dolby Atmos or DTS or some sort of multi-channel mix-like approach, and we either do the headphones one, which is, like I said, a binaural kind of down mix approach. Works very well though, to be honest. Or the speaker subwoofer approach that we're used to with home theater. And I think that's what a lot of people prefer. They don't really want to necessarily be using headphones. And so they put together these speaker systems. And I had talked in other videos about how a big limiting factor for multi-channel systems is often the speakers don't have enough output. And so trying to be able to put together a really good sounding multi-channel system for cheap is not possible, because the speakers that you have access to for cheap either don't measure well or they don't have enough output, or both. I mean, realistically, most don't do either well. There are exceptions. There are some speakers, no, I shouldn't say that. There are no exceptions to the measuring really well and having enough output for a big room. But there are exceptions when it comes to gaming, because typically gaming we think of as desktop systems. So we've got our monitors, maybe we've got one big curved monitor or 3 monitors together. I have 2 right in front of me, not for gaming, but for other things. And so then you can put your speakers. There's some tricky parts to this though, like where do you put the speakers? It would depend a lot on the height of the monitors. You either would put them below or to the left and the right with a center below, or center might be above. So like in my kind of system here, I've got a monitor up here, and then right above it you could put a center channel, and then left and right to either side. Obviously you can't put speakers behind your monitors because they're solid devices and sound doesn't travel through. They make a better door than a window, as they say. Anyway, those speakers can be really small. They really don't have to play all that loud. In fact, you're going to be basically just a meter from them. So all they have to do is 105 decibels at that 1 meter. That opens up a ton of options. There's a lot of speakers that can do that and then some without issue. And so now all of a sudden, doesn't mean they're going to be super cheap, but now all of a sudden for like $800 to $1,000 a pair, maybe $400 or $500 each, you can actually get a pretty decent speaker that will handle the left, center, and right duties. And then, you know, they're cheap enough, you probably can just use them on stands for your surrounds or mount some behind you for rear surround. Now, many of the same issues with multi-channel surround systems still applies. If you're going to mount those speakers, if like your monitors are up against a wall, and those speakers are basically against a wall, you're going to have some of the same acoustic issues you would have if you stuck speakers against a wall, like an on-wall speaker. So the center channel is probably going to be right up against the wall, and the left and the right are probably going to be pulled out, and you're going to get what's sometimes referred to as an Allison effect or an SBIR effect, and it's basically a boundary effect from the sound wrapping around the speaker. At low frequencies they do that, hitting that wall, and then as it bounces back and comes forward, it mixes back with the direct sound, out of phase by the distance between the front of the speaker and the wall, and then back again. So that distance, that total time, that causes a delay in the signal that then causes them to mix in a mismatched phase way that causes constructive and destructive interference. You get peaks and dips in the response from that. So just like in a home theater, got to treat that front wall around the speakers to address that. It's a little bit tricky to do with the monitors, and the monitors themselves also cause issues because sound now is reflecting off of the monitors. Not a lot you can do about that. That actually is just something you have to kind of play with. So having good directivity control on the speaker, something like a Genelec, for instance, like those coaxial ones, probably are a good option because they do a good job controlling directivity around the speaker. One of the tricky things, though, that you'll run into is a lot of speakers have different vertical and horizontal dispersion. And so, as an example, they're designed only to operate in an upright position, which isn't very good for center channel. And there aren't necessarily a lot of great powered small center channels that you could use for that. So you might look at, for instance, passive speakers, and then you have to find passive speakers that are small enough to work in this scenario, but with good output. Again, they may exist, they're just a little bit trickier to find. So a lot of the stuff becomes still the same issues. There's a particular aperture between the left, center, and right that you want to achieve. That doesn't change with games from movies. You've got side surrounds, rear surrounds, overhead effects. Again, all of that's still there. In fact, games are probably rendering those effects in a much more realistic way than movies do. They're actually using some of the same mathematics that underlie ambisonics, and high order ambisonics in particular, to create sound objects and place them all around you. And so they can do that with a great deal of precision. Depending on how they're then exporting that, if you will, or encoding it into a format that you can use with speakers. So for instance, they may be, this is the part of it that I don't know that well. On a computer game, at least, they may be directly sending it out to your sound device, whatever it is, in a way that actually is using a decoder built into the gaming software itself. In which case it may actually be ambisonics at its essence, or some modified form of ambisonics. And there are some like that. In that scenario, what you would want is you wouldn't want to use a receiver. You'd actually want to use the direct outputs from the computer, which could be an external sound card still. It just has to be able to read it as a sound card. So probably you could use a really high quality studio USB sound device that has a sufficient number of channel outputs. I'm going to guess probably a minimum of 7 or 8, but probably more to get height and everything else. And then that would give you the best quality. The other possibility is it may be able to send it out as like Dolby Atmos, in which case a receiver could work, or the computer itself may be able to decode that. It just depends. I'm thinking the computer probably can't. I'm not totally sure how the gaming systems are working with that, but again, reach out to me and let me know if you guys do know how that decoding is happening. That's the part I'm not really sure about. I know that the gaming engines themselves have actually been adopting various pieces of software that are often related to ambisonics. They're an advancement of, or just an implementation of the ambisonics approach that allows you to then take those objects on the screen that are being moved around and create similar sound objects that can be decoded amongst however many speakers you have. With something like a PlayStation or an Xbox type device, that one doesn't have the same capabilities. So from a computer standpoint, it's got a very powerful computer inside of it. It could do a lot more, but as I understand it, sound is coming out of those primarily through the HDMI port into your source, that is the source, into your decoder, which is going to be a receiver, which means it can't do anything other than either multi-channel PCM, Dolby Atmos, DTSX, or like RO. I'm not aware of any games that are encoded in RO, but there might be some. Again, reach out and let me know. And then in terms of DTSX versus Atmos versus multi-channel PCM, I'm not really sure. I don't play games, so I don't look at what they're doing. The game itself at its core is still going to have the same kind of rendering system that's going to be used to figure out where the objects are supposed to be in real time. So that's still probably based around an ambisonics-like approach, but then that's going to get downsampled to something else, and that's where something like Atmos comes in. What that means is speaker placement is still going to follow the same basic Atmos rules, because that's how that works. And you know, it doesn't matter if it's at your desktop, where, like I said, you can scale everything down, or it's going to be on a big projector screen that you're going to be playing with, in which case you're scaling it back up. But now again, same issues we had before as with any home theater system. Same acoustic issues, same speaker issues, same placement issues, etc. So in many cases, the issues with gaming are not really different from home audio. In fact, if anything, I think they make them that much more critical, because the actual encoding side of it is so much better than what's happening in movies, that the decoding side could lead to something that is essentially much more realistic than you would get from typical movies. A lot of that is going to be on how it's implemented. So not every game is going to do a great job implementing these engines and creating really realistic audio, but some do, and certainly it's cool and impressive what they're doing. There's a part of me that wants to just buy some of these gaming systems just to experience it, you know, because I know that at its essence, it's capable of being so much better than movies. But I've not really experienced it myself. I mean, the last gaming system I owned was a PlayStation 3. I was still in graduate school, I'm pretty sure. And when it died, I threw it away and I never bought another one. And even when it died, I was using it as a Blu-ray player. I wasn't even using it for playing games anymore. So anyway, there's a part of me that wants to get back into it for that reason alone, just because I want to like know what it sounds like and kind of experience that. But I do get asked questions about it a lot too. And people are often asking me, like, how do you optimize for this or that? And my knee jerk is always like, I don't know, I don't game, so I don't really know how that works. And on the other hand, like I said, I do know that the physics hasn't changed. The encoding, decoding is all related to the same concepts. And the layout requirements and acoustics are the same issues. They're, you know, if anything, it's the desktop part that sort of changes things. The desktop is such a smaller scale, and it adds in extra issues that you just have to scale it down and then address those extra issues. Reflections off the desk, reflections off the screen, the fact that things are now against walls more likely than not that you have to deal with. Anyway, I hope this was helpful and that you found this informative. If you guys think this is a cool topic that you want me to get more into, if you can tell me what part of the topic you're most interested in, that would be most helpful for me to figure out. You know, I can do some background reading to kind of make sure that I'm up to speed on what's happening in the industry, and then I can speak to how that applies here. If you guys disagree with something I said, please share. It's helpful. You know, it could be that I did have something wrong, or it could be that there's actually a misunderstanding. Again, please let me know your perspectives on this. If you are really into gaming and like you've put your surround system together specifically for that purpose, tell me about it. I want to hear more. So again, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel.